I think that's it. I think that's all good. We're getting better. Good evening. This is, I think, now the fifth conversation. Thank you all for attending. Welcome to those that are on socials. Feel free to comment. I will feed them in. Just by way of a very brief introduction, this is a conversation about women's safety. I don't want to do too much introduction, but what I do want to be kind of very clear into the intentions of the conversation. The reason why I guess we set this up is especially for women to be heard, for men's perceptions to be changed, and for love to be expressed. There's a lot of conversations that are currently going on, and wanting to kind of have an open, safe forum for people to discuss these points. That's all for myself. I'm going to hand over to Sonia to give some more introductions. Excuse me, last time changing things.
Yeah, great. So yeah, my name's Sonia, and I really wanted to be a part of this call because women's safety, safety for anyone is very, very important. And as a woman, I've experienced some of the things that are less positive when I walk by myself, even in the daytime. And it's just a huge thing that happens too regularly, and that it, you know, when it gets spoken about, there's so many different opinions and not always the ones that you want to hear after an experience that can be quite traumatic. So I think it's really good, like, discuss the ins and outs, and, you know, allowing people to give voice to their, to what they have to say, and how can people help one another when things happen as well. So yeah, I kind of wanted to know, to start off with, how does everyone feel about the recent news that was Sarah Everest's disappearance, that then led to quite a massive sort of outrage from the public? So I'm going to pass on to Ku, maybe, who's on my left, and then pass it to someone else.
Okay. Hi, my name is Ku or Lay, whichever is easiest. So I'm really honored to be part of this conversation. I think it's a hard one. It's a tough conversation. I think there's lots of things that from personal experience and knowing people who have gone through things, it's not always easy for women to talk about. And I think that it's really important to have this space where it is safe, and, you know, it's all love. That's where we're speaking from. Mm-hmm. Sarah Everard, I don't know. I don't think that this is the most positive outlook, but to be honest, when I saw that news, I wasn't surprised. I was outraged in the sense that I'm outraged when any woman is hurt or murdered. But it's one of those things, kind of disappointed, not surprised. And also, you know, there's many women since, not many, but there have been women since Sarah Everard who haven't been in the news. And I think that that says something to me as well. Not that she doesn't matter or that she should, you know, not be in the news. It's just why her and not these are the women that have been murdered or raped or harassed since that has happened. And I think that maybe speaks to how big the issue really is. The fact that we don't even know the full extent as the general public of what's going on, what's happening to women today.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I'll pass it. Someone right below me, Laura.
Oh, I'm on mute. That's me. Hello. I think following the murder of Sarah Everard, I've experienced a fair few emotions, certainly right after and then in the ensuing days. But the one thing that I think stood out for me personally was that it prompted conversations with a lot of my female friends. And it revealed all of the sorts of things that we would do on a routine basis in order to protect ourselves, without really realizing that we were all doing it. It all just seemed to be a given. And so I think it just highlighted to me and my circle of female friends, at least, that, you know, are all women doing this? Yeah. And same, I think feelings of anger, disappointment, frustration. I was on social media surprised by the, I was expecting to see more interaction from men, but I didn't. In fact, what I saw was a lot of men saying, you know, well, yes, but it's not us. So trying to excuse it rather than listening to what women were trying to say. Yeah, and I think that's sort of my take on it in a nutshell. And I guess I'll pass it on as well. If I go to, I think Celestine, just below Elle.
Hi, sorry, I'm gonna keep my video off when I'm not speaking because I'm actually in the kitchen right now. Hi, I'm Celestine. I work for a humanitarian organization, and so I kind of work a little bit with gender-based violence kind of in my work, and I come kind of from a more, or at least I'm more interested in a more institutional point of view, so in terms of safeguarding and protection of various populations from prisoners, refugees, immigrants, and whatever. So that's kind of what I speak to a lot of my friends about. And so one of my friends that I speak to recommended this event. She's from Nottingham. So thanks so much for having me here. Hi.
Do we want to jump to Elle? Is that, sorry, I know I'm not going to say your name properly, but.
That's okay. Elle is what I go by most of the time. Yeah, I share a lot of the feelings that you've expressed, Sonia and Lara. And is it Koule? Koule? Am I saying that correctly? Yeah. And especially the point you raised, Koule, with regards to being appalled by what happened, but not being surprised by it. And I've also spent a lot of time thinking about why this particular case is the one to have captured the media attention. And I think, typically speaking, when you look at media coverage of violence against women, it does tend to focus more on these kind of more sensational or newsworthy events that are always the worst case scenario that has happened to a woman by a stranger on the street. And the fact is that we know that the majority of violence against women is perpetrated by men that women actually know, right? By partners or former partners. And so, you know, this is something that I think is not called to public attention often enough. I don't think that there is a public conversation around the fact that we are actually most at risk from the men that we know in our lives and not from random strangers on the street. And I think even when you look at the policy responses that have been drawn up to this in terms of, you know, better street lighting and undercover police in clubs, whoever thought that was a good idea. But, you know, it's tackling the tiniest kind of tip of the iceberg of the issue. The fact is that so many of us are not safe in our homes. And that just seems to be completely absent from like the public conversation, but also policy conversation around this. So yeah, that's kind of been my my reflections since that's happened. And also, Koule, you mentioning that you know, since Sarah's death, there have been, I think the statistic I most recently heard is 11 more women have been killed since Sarah's death, and yet there hasn't been the same kind of coverage, if any at all. So yeah, and I think also in relation to this point, something that is really key to talk about is the fact that, you know, ultimately Sarah is a white woman who has been killed and received the publicity that she has, and yet women of color and Black women who have suffered the same fate haven't received anywhere near the amount of attention that she has, which she needed, but so did they. So yeah, that's my collection of thoughts. Should I pass it? Is that how? Yeah, okay. I'll throw the ball to Alex.
Cool, thanks, Al. Would definitely just, yeah, all the points you've raised, I've definitely heard before from friends and family as well. I think that the whole episode, and I know probably this talk in itself has been spurred on from obviously what you mentioned, the massive media coverage that came from Sarah's death. But as you said, it's been going on for a long time. And it's a conversation, and I know, I can't remember, was it Sonia or Kule who mentioned there's men that basically will kind of pass it off in these conversations to say, you know, it's not us doing it, so, you know, it doesn't involve me, or, you know, I don't do it, my friends don't do it, so what has it got to do with us? But actually it is a conversation that all men need to be involved in, because there's I mean, you can be oblivious to things, of course, but once you understand, and it's about like perspective taking. So, you know, life isn't all good just because, you know, you're all good. It's kind of looking at it from another person's eyes and seeing actually having to live in a particular way and having to do certain things outside of the norm just to keep safe. And even that not necessarily being enough is like, it shouldn't have ever had to get to that point, but it's been at that point for some time. So it's something that is not one person's duty to try and correct, but like everyone, and men definitely need to be alongside women in that and pushing it forward. So yeah, I'm interested to hear everybody's thoughts during this conversation. I will pass it on to Jerome.
Thank you. There's a lot that could be said from a bystander, as a male, as a human, to this topic. So it's fairly hard to speak from any of those at one particular time, but what I really want to do is figure out how, because I've had conversations personally with the majority of you, and those conversations are, as somebody that has a platform, a very small platform, even within my circle of male friends, figuring out what I can take from conversations like these and relate, maybe even being a conduit to say, hey, something of which I took for granted, or I know that others have taken for granted. This is kind of the way in which you need to hear this message. So I am in between just listening and in between, I was saying the term is egghead, from somebody that, even from myself, somebody's always got something to learn, to say, hey, from other people's points of view, this is something of which may be a very distant thing to understand and comprehend. It's very odd that we have to have the conversation, but then saying that, I've texted my female friend, hey, same thing, which has been the massive concern. It shouldn't have to be normal. Let me know when you get home. And that has been one of the, I guess, the biggest balls to push downhill, to acknowledge that this conversation needs to be had. So yeah, that's a bit about myself. Passing on to, I think the only person left is Shakima.
Hi everyone. Sorry, I jumped on a little bit late. It's been interesting, the bits that I've picked up so far, and it's a couple of nights ago, a friend and I were talking actually, even around choices in picking our home. So where she lives in London, where I live in here in Nottingham. And actually the fact that we factored in where our homes were from public transports, kind of were the streets to our homes lit, kind of those sorts of things factor into those big decisions as well as smaller decisions. And it's hearing you guys talk about it, it's like, for me, it was kind of a subconscious thing that I did. But when my friend was talking and she was kind of saying, yeah, it's coming up to the time when she's looking to move house. And she's saying, actually, these are things that I'm actively thinking about. And it's just really interesting, actually, when you then start considering the decisions you make without realizing that you're making them, and not realizing that actually the reason you're doing that is because you're a woman and you are making sure that actually, as best as you can, the different environments that you're in, the different routes that you're taking, that you're as safe as you can be. So yeah, actually, it's just kind of listening to what everyone said, kind of feeding off a conversation I had literally two nights ago, and just kind of reflecting on all of that and hearing, other people's experiences as well. So thank you for the conversation.
Thank you. That was a wonderful input. And actually, so the way that this is going to work, how we're going to discuss this even further, because obviously everybody's got some different experiences, some similar experiences. So we're actually going to go through a series of questions, and I'm not sure if Jerome's going to put them on for shared screen. Wonderful, thank you. And the first question actually really relates back to what you're saying, Shiki, about whose responsibility is women's safety. And as you said, it seems like a lot of it is down to the woman to make sure that she's safe at all times. And now kind of the floor is open for anyone to talk. You can just unmute yourself, don't have to be in any particular order. But yeah, what do you think for this question?
I can go. I think, as you said, the onus has very much been placed on women being responsible for our own safety. And we see this in the way violence against women is discussed, in terms of the victim blaming. We see, what was she wearing, what time was she out, who was she with, etc. And even the way the media reports on issues of violence against women, in down to a grammatical thing of using the passive voice and completely removing men from the conversation. This woman was attacked, not this man attacked this woman, which again just places all of the onus on us. And I think as women daily, we're constantly doing the work of trying to keep ourselves safe and trying to protect ourselves. And I won't go as far as to say that women's safety is solely men's responsibility. I think it's our collective responsibility. I think it's our collective responsibility to keep each other safe. But men have to step up. Men have to realize that it is as much their responsibility as ours. And it's not enough just to say, I'm not sexist, I'm not a misogynist, I don't attack women, I don't abuse women. It's not enough to be passive in this. There has to be an active stance taken, because that's what responsibility means. So yeah, it's our collective responsibility, but it has to be active responsibility, especially on behalf of men, because as women, we're already doing our part.
I'm gonna mute Safi.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you, Elle. I think, like you said, as humans, we should be looking after each other, right? Oh, sorry, Celestine, I just saw your hand was up. Okay. I think that's what it comes down to. There's no one party that is fully responsible, because I think if I asked my friend this the other day, actually, I was like, we were talking about women's safety and male friend, and just kind of this understanding that as a woman, I sometimes find it difficult when there's language that's used as if I, as a woman, depend on a man for my safety. And I think that is the other side of the spectrum that I see things going towards. It's either it's fully a woman's responsibility, don't wear short shorts and don't be out late by yourself, or it's fully a man's responsibility to protect the fragile flower that is the woman. And I think that there should be a middle ground. And I think common sense would say that there is a middle ground. And I think we can be honest about biological differences. Men tend to be larger and physically stronger than women. So I think that in that regard, like you said, as a community, when someone doesn't have the ability to physically defend themselves, if a man or woman sees that person in trouble, then it does become your responsibility as a human being, I think, in a community, to step in for that other person in your community and say, hey, that's not right, or you shouldn't do that. And I think also, unfortunately, that we have to understand, or that, yeah, unfortunately, there's such a deficit, and unfortunately, there are men out there who are not respectful physically or in their words or just in the way that they conduct their lives. And that then creates more work for men who are respectful. For example, I was at the bus stop the other night and two men walked up behind me and stood behind me at the bus stop. They could have been just fine. They probably had no ill will towards me, but I felt so unsafe just because there were two males behind me and I was alone. And I think that even though it's not necessarily fair, when I think men or women understand that standing behind someone in the dark is something that can cause fear in the person, then we not necessarily, I don't want to say responsibility, but part of me is like, yeah, we kind of do have a responsibility, maybe cross the road and walk on the other side. It's not asking you to do too much. It's just kind of asking you to be a little bit considerate of the people around you. And I think that can go for any person that's in our community.
I completely agree with what you say in terms of that, we're never alone. No man is an island. We're all part of communities, regardless of where we live, and we raise each other and we help each other and support each other, and sometimes we become threats to each other. About that kind of communal aspect, I woke up this morning to my best friend who's Indian sending me a video of a man stabbing his wife on the street in Delhi, just a recent video, I think, in public, plain daylight, and no one stopped him. And of course, this is part of the wider debate of, I think most people would have heard of, violence against women in India. And I think what I notice is different in India is that there is generally a consensus that it's a problem, that violence against women is real, and that something needs to be done about it. And a lot of it has been done already. And of course, there's progress to go still. Whilst in the UK and in other countries in Europe where I've lived, if you ever saw, I don't mean the last few weeks, the last few weeks were slightly different, but I mean, throughout my life, most of the time, if you saw a really violent incident, it was often put off as like just a one-off kind of like, well, yeah, but it's not we can't really do much about it. There's always going to be violence against women. There's, it's already a lot less than it is in other countries. Like, kind of, no one, I don't mean to say that people would actually say that, like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just a few hundred women. Yeah, but that was generally the feeling, was like, well, to a certain degree, we just have to tolerate that. There's always going to be violence against women. And I think we as a community need to say that we don't actually tolerate any violence against not just women, of course, but also admitting that it is still systematic. It might not be the rates that some Delhi New Delhi might have experienced, but still it's real, and any woman can tell you stories from her and her circle that it is real. And we just as a community need to say that we have a threshold, like any tolerance for it, that our threshold should be at 0, you know, and that's how we should raise everyone around us to believe. So I always told my little brother, if you see a woman walking alone in the street at night, don't just go on the other side, just leave her alone, so that he knows. He's like, but I'm scared too at night. I'm like, doesn't matter, just go away.
Yeah, I completely agree with what everyone's saying about being a community thing. And so, for example, something that I've noticed is that, for example, these type of conversations don't happen very often, because if they happen, they tend to happen around an incident like the one we've seen recently. So women may have their own experiences that when something happened to us personally, we can talk to our friends, but that's probably about it. But then, you know, they normally probably wouldn't share that in their workplace, for example. So when there's an incident like this that's happened, it does make space, create space for people to have this conversation, men and women, about a situation that's outside of themselves. Whilst this doesn't validate each woman's experience, I think it allows men to then look at, you know, how can they help women in those situations. And you guys talked about how to make a woman feel safe, things like walking on the other side of the road if it's night, or slightly slower, or, you know, far away from a woman type thing. But I think there's also quite a lot that encouraging conversations where men can actually talk to other men about not being a bystander. Because if women generally don't talk to men about these issues, and men don't generally talk to each other about these issues, it's the question that I have is like, where can men have these conversations where they talk to one another? If most men are good and most men won't do things to women and intimidate them. So is how can we actually have men that are able to discuss in their friendship groups or family groups on how to help the women in their lives safer? So yeah, I think that's my 2% on just helping. Yeah, how can other people help women feel safer?
The bystander thing, just speaking into that, I guess. And I'm also very aware that obviously Alex and I are the only men on the call, and don't want to be an advocate to male voices, very conscious about doing that. What I will try and do and to do is, if there was a situation by which I will jump into any situation, sometimes at my own detriment. Not that many people, not that many men are courageous and confident enough to go about that situation. It's very easy to say, hey, this is none of my business. That can go from household into community, not advocating, but definitely just saying, hey, that it's none of my business, especially now. Everyone's just worried about flipping what's going on in their world. So hopefully these conversations will be just like, hey, the community to which we are in is, you are responsible for your common man, your common woman. And yeah, culturing that is a big shift. So only speaking to the bystander, but apart from everything that was raised, it was really wonderful and good to listen to.
Yeah, and I think on that bystander point, Jerome, I think it's not, you're right. I think the reason why it's foreign is because it's never really been done in our kind of generation, this looking out for your neighbor, or, you know, looking out for the people around you. And it is uncomfortable. And I think it's going out of your way. It's something that we do have to learn and like kind of try to bring into our culture. And I think maybe sometimes, like you said, I think there's I think it's hard because you don't know, maybe this is a couple fighting and maybe there's, you know, there's something that you don't understand what's going on. You don't want to step in and make it worse. At the same time, if you walk away from that and then you see that man or woman on the news later having been hurt, I think that also, I think personally for myself, because I've been in those situations where I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should say anything in this moment, more for my own personal safety, if I'm being very honest, as a woman. Sometimes I'm afraid to speak out because I don't want to then have that anger and that violence turn towards me. But then I also sometimes ask myself, like, well, if I see that person later has been harmed, how am I going to feel about having been there and not said anything? And and it's not like everyone should do this, but I think that's maybe how we can, having these conversations, maybe that could become a bit more of a normal thought process or a normal kind of conversation with our friends of like, you know, like, yeah, well, maybe we should speak up. And I think often in the very few times where I've witnessed something and kind of just said, hey, what are you doing? Or what's going on? Instantly, the people who were being assaulted, who were doing the violence would run away or, you know, back off immediately. And I think it's kind of understanding that quite often, not every instance, and again, I'm not trying to tell anyone to do this because you need to take care of your personal safety. But in many instances, it really does just take that one other person saying, hey, I see what you're doing. You know, I see you there. What are you doing there? And then that's usually all it kind of takes. And I think that it's for me, that's a good reminder. It's like encouraging to me.
I think what you both highlighted about, you know, where we are kind of at in society with it gradually, obviously we all started in a very collective way and then it gradually eroded to that point of it being very individualistic, everybody looking out for themselves, their person, the people that they know. And just, I guess it's almost like a survival mode, you know, make sure that I'm good and then worry about somebody else. But I think that whole bystander effect of, you know, being among lots of people, and then I think there is that idea of, oh, it's none of my business, or somebody else, I'll wait for somebody else to interject first because I may not have the whole context, or whatever kind of thing somebody puts in front of themselves to avoid having to confront the issue. And I think a lot, especially I think with groups and friendship groups that are maybe male heavy or just fully male, there's probably a lack of, it can probably descend into an echo chamber where they all have similar perceptions of women, or, you know, behaviors towards women as well. And I think there is the danger of, you know, conversations like these, or even if it was a conversation with just men, all kind of having the same mindset and reference point, where they all, you know, agree with each other and say, you know, these are terrible things, these are things that shouldn't happen. It doesn't necessarily move or change anything because nobody's mindset has been changed. So it's about, I guess, figuring out a way to go outside of your typical group to somehow engage with those people that are in those groups that have those perceptions and have those honest conversations with them, knowing obviously it's got, with these types of things, people's minds are very difficult to change, especially in this time with, you know, it's a shoot from the hip kind of time. So, you know, everybody's on social media. It's about finding your standpoint and then, you know, dying on that hill for it. But I think finding a way to essentially just interject, you know, and it's going to be a collective thing, because I mean, I wouldn't have the answer to know how to reach those people, but I have to imagine that in some of those groups, there'll be like even one or two that don't have those feelings. They see a friend or somebody do that, but don't have the courage to speak up because, you know, those are their only friends. They don't want to be ostracized. They don't want to be left out. But it's, I guess, how do we reach those types of people?
Yeah, I think that was really great, Alex. Thanks for that input. So what do we think safety looks like? What is safety today in today's society? What does safety look like? I guess I can go first since I asked the question. To me, as a woman, for me, I think safety looks like being able to go about my business and have it be my business and have me mind my business and everyone else mind their own business. And, you know, that's how we continue on. And I would imagine for anyone, no matter what, you know, what you identify as, that safety could be, you know, being able to move about the world and be physically unharmed, you know, to not worry about your physical being physically harmed, and maybe in an even more altruistic outlook is maybe even also being able to move through the world and not be emotionally harmed or attacked just for existing. And I think that should be considered part of safety personally. Whether or not that's applicable to society right now, I mean, maybe the first step is just the physical safety. It feels a little bit of a taking a loss to get by physical safety by sacrificing maybe a mental or emotional safety. But yeah, I guess that would be kind of my viewpoint at this moment. But yes, our next question is, in today's society, what does safety look like?
I want to echo what you said, Kule, with regards to needing to prioritize our emotional and psychological safety as well, because I really think it's something that is not spoken enough about. The fact that as women, we undergo so much emotional and psychological violence from men, and it's the same seed that breeds physical violence, and the scars are just as deep and just as damaging. And I think that for me, that is, you hit the core there, being able to move through the world knowing that I am emotionally and psychologically safe, as well as physically safe. Would be my vision of what safety looks like.
I'm gonna throw a little curveball there, and I will share a personal instance with me, so apologies if that's upsetting. So for example, feeling emotionally safe is going to be very hard for anyone who has experienced any kind of trauma previously, because if something has happened to you, then how are you going to put yourself, for women, how are you going to put yourself in the same situation and not be thinking about all the previous choices you've done before, which then, not through your fault, but through the perpetrator of the person who's, you know, broken your safety. How can you go about your daily life without thinking about how could your choices have been made different or have made a difference? And actually, probably don't need to share the story I was going to share, but it's just something simple as, if you've walked down an unlighted street and something has happened, knowing that you're going to have to take similar routes for different occasions at some point in life, like how would you ever feel safe in that scenario? It doesn't matter what precautions you've taken. And that's really tough. And I think, yeah, for a lot of people, you may say, oh, everything seems safe, or everything is safe, or there's no one there to attack or whatever. But if someone has had that trauma, it's important to know the person will probably not feel safe, and you may actually need like specialist help to, and by specialist help, it could be lots of different things, like counseling, church, that can help because it heals, and things like that. So yeah, that's all.
Can I respond to that? Yeah, you're absolutely right. The journey of recovery from emotional and psychological violence is long and is complicated. In my experience, and I'm speaking from an experiential perspective here, what has made me feel safe is being able to talk to people about my experience who have been able to hold my experience, who have been able to listen and hold me without needing to offer any buts or, but are you sure it was this? But did you do this? But maybe was it otherwise? And that's been the difference for me between speaking to men who have been able to hold me and my experience in that conversation, and men who have automatically wanted to question what I'm saying and not come to the defense of my perpetrator, but try and get their heads around him or be more concerned about how I was with him, as opposed to just listening with no buts and no questions and no need to challenge or make me think that it was somehow otherwise.
If I can just go on with that thought, for me, I was actually going to say safety to me would be next time something happens to me, feeling like I can report it and talk about it to anyone without having to worry about what that means and being disbelieved and questioned. But yeah, I agree with what you said, but also that women do it too, and they also disbelieve, especially when they love the person who's been accused of it, because of course, you know, we divide the world into good guys and bad guys, good people and bad people, and you know, you just never think that the people close to you would do these things. You know, the stranger on the street at nighttime is a much more palatable scenario, and yeah, and I still have surprisingly many people who keep well, I mean, I know a group of friends who have a guy within their circle who's been accused publicly by 7 different women of getting abusive or harassing them when drunk. That's only 7 that spoke about it publicly. So, I mean, it's significant, and they're just keeping him in their circle, you know, and yeah, and not to mention, you know, family, domestic abuse, all of these things. And it's, we prefer not to believe it, even we do it, you know, not just men.
Yeah, I think there's a common theme here of when safety looks, yeah, what looks like safety is being able to report and talk about the experience and not being judged by it. And that relates back to what we were first talking about, how a lot of the onus is put on the woman about how she behaves or doesn't behave to explain why incidents happen. And therefore, we probably would be more safe if we knew that should something happen, we would be able to actually go to someone and we would believe about it, and there would be something that would happen to whoever's done anything. And you know, when you've had incidents where, because it was your boyfriend or someone close to you, that no one believed you, if you're someone random on the streets and nobody believes you because there's no CCTV in that area, you know, yeah, so having those, making sure that the people that are perpetrating the emotional and physical attacks and abuse, they're the ones who are going to receive the consequence of their actions, and not just the women living with the consequence of their actions or inactions. Yeah, I think that's probably what's actually happening. Oh, sorry, would anybody else like to comment on this?
I think probably just last thing would be understanding what it is that causes such a defensive reaction. I know, Elle, you mentioned that obviously a lot of men can obviously jump to say, you know, yeah, but what did you do, or what state was he in, or whatever it may be. What is it that causes that defense? Even if it's not you saying, okay, you specifically did this, it's this person, and the fact that you share that same sex or gender with that person, that then causes you to get your back up. And then I guess understanding how to separate that so that people can actively just listen to someone and take it in, rather than, you know, the quick fire reaction that everybody has to have nowadays to kind of bat something away, almost to keep that person's perception of, I don't know if it's the whole male, or the whole kind of spectrum of males or men, or just themselves, or what have you, but breaking that would probably definitely go a way of going on that road towards women's safety as well.
Yeah, thank you all for that part of the discussion. I think that was important. It's definitely a place where a lot more can be done. So yeah, next question would be, thank you. So what are some of the unnecessary things that women should not have to think about? So probably that goes nicely with what we've discussed so far. So what kind of things, oh, go on, Lara, sorry.
Sorry. I think this leads on from what I would have said in response to the question, in today's society, what does safety look like? For me, on a personal level, safety is about being able to leave, and I speak from a personal level, is being able to leave the house and not feel that I have to take extra considerations into account, or I have to in any way alter my plans in order to feel that I am safer. And so coming back to this particular question about what are some of the unnecessary things that women shouldn't have to think about, I think there's a fair few examples, ranging from, you know, where am I going tonight and how am I going to get back home? Do I need to leave by a certain time? Do I need to text someone when I get back in? Who am I going to call? Who's going to pick up that phone or text? If you're in a car, do I need to lock my car door? All of these little things, which I think I mentioned at the start of the conversation, are things that I realized that myself and female friends were just doing on a routine basis. And I don't think we should be having to do these. We shouldn't have to be having these afterthoughts. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of those things that you just mentioned, Laura, is definitely, I could just check them off the things that I think about every time I leave my house. And I think another thing that I don't think women should have to think about is, what are we wearing? I constantly, the other day it was warm and I wore shorts to the grocery store, and maybe 50 meters out of my door, I wanted to turn around, come back home, put on baggy trousers, and then go back out. And I wasn't wearing anything that I think most people would think is provocative. All of the private bits were covered, you know, but why do I have to think about that? You know, even if I was wearing booty shorts and my bum was hanging out a little bit, should I have to be worried about my physical safety? I know it's not the same comparison. I know that men are very visual and things like that. but men walk around without shirts on in the summer, and I don't feel the need to go and catcall them. And even if I find them attractive, because sometimes I do, you know, and I think for me, that's probably the biggest thing for me right now, because it is coming to summer and I have missed wearing my summer clothes, and it's a real concern. And I never realized that I thought about it until it started getting warm again. And I had this one moment and I was like, wow, this is actually something that I think about. And also I think that maybe just the second guessing of strangers. So for example, taking an Uber or a cab or anything like that at night alone as a female. I don't think I should have to worry about getting into this cab and am I going to actually make it home. I actually have, there's certain apps that you can have the app notify one person when you get into a cab and notify that person when the ride is over. And I have that set to a male so that if there is a moment where I'm not getting home or they haven't received that, then hopefully they can, who's in my city, can come and help, you know, or just check on me. And I don't think that should be something that we have to think about either.
Yeah, I was going to say, because for me, the biggest one, I guess, is safety when I go for exercise, because I like, well, now I enjoy running. And I've got 2 routes near me, which are, one is really lovely, it's by a canal, and canals are like a big no. Like I quite often struggle to go to canals these days, unless it's daylight and it's like a route that I know is busy. So if it's like coming late in the evening, that's the first thing I'm thinking is, what time is sunset? Because if I go down the canal when it's already getting dark, there's no way, because I know there's not going to be many people there because canal isn't lit. So obviously there's less foot traffic. So yeah, so checking the weather app for what time does sunset go, which is silly. And even then, it's like what I'm wearing as well, because obviously we all women probably wear leggings when we go for a run, form fitting, but that's what they're meant to be like. They're meant to be form fitting, allow you to run, whatever. And even that, I can't really feel comfortable wearing it, because the amount of times, even in the daylight, where I've been beeped at or whatever, even wearing like a jacket on top, and I still get sort of the attention that I'm not asking for, that doesn't make me feel safe. So yeah, it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one.
I think I used to be nicer to people and then I realized a lot of people overstep boundaries really quickly when they notice you're a nice person. And now I'm not that friendly with strangers. In fact, I'm not that friendly with a lot of people anymore, simply because it exhausts me more to later down the line have to be like, whoa, like, no, like, you know, we stop here, and that would exhaust me more. So now I just like put up a more cold front, but I know that means I'm missing out on chance encounters, you know, new friends, random, you know, fun stories of meeting people on the bus, the train, traveling the road, walking my dog, whatever. And I mean, I'm happier now than when I was younger and nicer, because I feel more confident and safer. But yeah, I do feel like that was almost like a choice I had to make at some point. Like, how do I want to walk around this world? Do I want to smile at everyone? And I realized, no, I can't do that.
I really, really feel that. I was going to say the way that we shouldn't have to think about the way we hold ourselves around men, like in public, and the way we interact with strangers. And this is something that I've actually received from women. Like, women have said to me, don't be like that. Don't be that friendly. Don't be that nice. You're leading him on. He's going to think that, you know, you're doing this for another reason, which I think just speaks to our own internalized misogyny. But yeah, absolutely. Like I've got to a point now when I'm walking down the street, I'll actively avoid eye contact because I just don't want it to be perceived in the wrong way. And I'm much more guarded with how I carry myself because I'm just hyper aware of things being misconstrued and knowing how they have been misconstrued in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, I never thought about it until this moment, but honestly, it's very true. I'm a lot meaner than I used to be. And I and I realized that it's absolutely that. I don't smile at people anymore. I like mean mug people. I kind of have RBF to begin with, so I didn't have as much of a problem. But even then, you know, I'm just like, that is not the person I am inside. And I think the entire world has to see this kind of cold and standoffish person that, unfortunate, but like you said, like safety. And I think the final thing I wanted to add, Sonia, that you reminded me of is I have several routes to and from my home to my grocery shops, my home to my work, my home to my uni. And I don't travel the same route to or from home more than once in a 48-hour time frame. And that's to me, verbalizing that right now, it kind of feels a bit insane. The fact that I can't even just go on a normal route, like, you know, if I was young and I was walking to school, let's say, you know, usually school kids, you walk the same route to and from home. When I was a kid, that's how it went. And now I would never do that. I would never take the same route to and from school or work or shops or things, just because, you know, because I don't.
We may have lost Kule. Okay.
But I do it every.
Kule, we're losing you a little bit, or we lost you a little bit. But I
Oh.
think we understood what you're trying to say. I was actually going to say as well in response to that, I'm with my running, I'm quite similar. I don't go running 2 days in a row at the same time, or at any given, I don't choose a time to go running. I could sometimes, if it's weekend, whatever time in the morning, I feel like I can go, I'll go. But I've decided, one, I don't like to make routines, that's fine. But also I realized I actually enjoy not having that routine because I've seen myself running and thinking, oh, I'm glad that yesterday I came a bit earlier, or today I'm coming a bit earlier, and that's good because just in case. And I was just thinking whilst I'm running, it's one of my thoughts. That's a real shame. But actually, I'm going to ask the men in this call because I thought it was very interesting how Celestine and Elle and then Kule have all said about being less nice to strangers, and how, I guess, how do the men here feels an additional question that wasn't really conceived. How do you guys feel about approaching women for either in your circles that you know or women that you don't know? I guess, yeah, how do you think you feel about that?
It's funny, when the incident occurred, I went into saying, hey, like, what happens to, you know, the Chris Brown kind of like yo kind of scene when a guy comes up to a girl and is just like, hey, is that completely shattered? And I'm here processing whilst I'm listening to you ladies speak and thinking like maybe society has caused that whole moment of innocent romantic interest to be crumbled. Celeste, it's a shame to, and Kule, it's a shame to kind of to hear that is what the effect of society or men have caused the knock-on effect. But I understand it, and then for me to double make sure I understand, I'm just like, snap, what would it be for my daughter to ensure that I understand it? Last week, whilst I was out and about for friends, I wanted to engage with the people in the vicinity, men, women, couples, and it was very easy, maybe because I didn't have any ill or romantic / sexual interest in anybody to which I was approaching. So maybe that whole energy was very well identified in my hello, how are you? So it's a shame, to answer your question, Sonia, it's a shame, Celeste, Laura, that's the situation that has been birthed, but it doesn't surprise it. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that self-preservation and that mean mugging is essentially the next defense. Hey, don't approach me. I don't want to engage with you. Not now, not ever. That is a self-defense mechanism, and then it attaches on to understanding again by listening you and keeping yourself safe. That's the next thing that you can draw for, and as part of every day. It is a shame. I had no, even in an ideal situation, had no idea how to solve that. It is a shame.
Yeah, I agree. If I was a woman, I'd do exactly the same. If I'm out, you know, head down, get to where I'm going from A to B, just because self-preservation. And the funny thing is, I guess, obviously you guys talking about those things, I'd imagine you may not have had those instances where there's guys that see you, maybe want to talk to you, and you kind of pass them off, and then they go back to their friends like, oh, she's like this, she's like that, or they're like this, they're like that, without necessarily thinking about why somebody has to behave like that. So I think a lot of it comes down to, you know, just taking that step to perspective take, because I think often it's just nowadays people feel like it's about them. It's like, but not everything is about you. It's just, you know, take that instance to say, you know, it's not about you, and then figure out why. And obviously I hate that it would even need to be related in this way, and it has, and I know women relate it in this way, even though it doesn't obviously seem to make much difference. But people obviously saying, you know, what if this was your sister? What if this was your daughter? What if this was your mum? But you shouldn't obviously need to relate it to a family member for somebody to think of a woman as a whole person, human being, to be able to go on about their business. But then it'd be interesting to see, obviously, when those people are challenged in that way, how they rationalize what they would say, you know, oh no, you know, obviously if somebody did that to my sister, X, Y, Z, as opposed to them doing that same thing to a woman they don't know. But yeah, it's all of those things. Obviously, I know, as you were saying, you know, having to worry about booking an Uber, taking the bus, walking, and all those things I know very much I've taken for granted in the past. Like if I book an Uber, I'm not thinking about anything else. Like once I've booked it, it's booked, and I'm pretty much in my head, I already know I'm going to get home. Bus, and even like time of the night, more so I suppose being in Nottingham or the area that I'm in, if I walk, if I get the bus, whatever. So definitely then there is a lot of work to be done to I guess break those things down. But even because it's so deeply ingrained, like you don't lose those defense mechanisms. So I think it would be very much a generational thing over time. So yeah.
One of the things of which I gleaned, again, whilst because the men have the mic, I tuned in to an ITV moment that happened about 2 weeks ago. And there are a few things which I would like to share, and I'm going to see if I can go through some of the perspectives of which I'm hoping when anybody else listens to this. There's a wonderful, very simple, it's not about educating, what they say, it's not about protecting girls, it's about educating boys, because that's kind of a shift, and I'll say, oh yeah, sure, because I'm sure that's a whole I don't know, frame shift as to what you put your energy and your focus into in terms of directing teachable moments, they call it teachable moments, into males instead of the females. That's also a big thing.
Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing. That was all really good. We have one final question, I believe, which goes with a photo that Jerome is going to show us. And the question with this picture is, I guess if you saw these women on the street, why wouldn't they be treated equally? Why aren't these women treated equally?
It's coming. It's only taking a while. Come on. What happens? Oh, it's hidden. Okay.
So why wouldn't, how should clothes affect our interactions with society? Why wouldn't these women be treated equally?
I mean, I guess it depends from where in the world you're asking the question, right? But, you know, like historically, clothes have been a way to police women's bodies. And I think even now, when we look at what's going on in France in terms of the head covering and any girl under 18 not being able to wear it in school, and mothers of girls in school or children in school not being able to enter the school with their heads covered. And it's just so, like, I read something that said that it was like the legal age to consent to sex in France is 15 or 16. The legal age that they want to make consenting to wear a head covering is 18. Like, how does that make any sense? It doesn't. It's just, yeah, I mean, to answer the question on there, of course they shouldn't. Of course they shouldn't. But until women's bodies stop being objectified in the way they are, then ultimately clothes are gonna continue to be a way to police us. But, you know, the issue is not the clothes, the issue is the objectification of our bodies. And I think that's where we have to start any conversation around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm also gonna, sorry.
No.
I'm also going to add a different sort of thought into the mix, because some of this may not be about the clothes that you wear necessarily. So I'm looking at the last woman with the travel suitcase, you know, fully clothed, comfortable trainers, you know, you can tell she's a travel person probably in this situation. And like the amounts of precautions that a single traveling woman has to have, it's insane. Like, it's pretty much insane that women will travel to a different country by themselves just to explore. And it's not because of what they're wearing, but it's because of the idea of an independent woman, probably single. So if you're trying to deduce why is a woman traveling by herself in a different country, probably single. And then that's where, you know, people may have those sort of ingrained thoughts about women who travel instead of like raising a family, for example. Like, oh, she's a free woman, she doesn't care much for traditional values, or, you know, she probably has lots of boyfriends here and there, like one after the other, and doesn't place down roots, so she's easy prey. And it's nothing to do with how she wears. And it's a shame because, yeah, those assumptions, a lot of them may come from like older generations. Some of them will come from specifically from men, it could come from other women who are in more settled lifestyles, and that judging the choices that someone may make and associate that to their sexuality, I guess, which is, yeah, should never be done.
Yeah, one of the points I've got written down following on from else stuff is it's not too far to go from a jump from objectification of women and the porn industry. And yeah, there is a lot of sexualizations and objectifications, and I'm not versed in the way in which how it affects society. I just understand that it does. That half of the world is seen as sexual objects or just something that is not as highly valued as men. And that sexualization causes the lady wearing sunglasses and red heels to seem a lot more sexualized, and the way in which you engage with a sexual being, should I say, is, I guess, what is a very large issue to quite a lot of what it stems from. And it is difficult to then, no, it's not difficult, it's then a point to then speak into, yeah, men aren't going to like this, but men running around with like their own feelings and being able to channel that, and the way in which they engage with women is a whole other thing. And I guess speaking into kind of the top of the conversation, there's a lot of requirement for going off tangent now, but there is a space, should I say, and a requirement for men to speak to men as to how to engage with women healthily. They're apart from, again, what Sonia alluded to, apart from what you read in the Bible, there isn't really great role models. Even the role models end up coming out to be something else. See that they died or midway through their career, X, Y, and Z. So role models, there you go. Role models and relationships aren't role modeled in today's society. So yeah, that's kind of my input into this right there.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Like role models. I think, I don't, like you said, I don't know what porn does to men's brains or even women's brains for that matter. But I think even more concerning than porn, even, because there's at least this quote unquote understanding that the people involved in that are there by consent, and most likely they're getting paid. We know that that's not the case all the time, but there's kind of that connotation. I think something that maybe for me, I would say objectifies women even more than porn is Hollywood and music and social media. It's these instances where you are objectifying women who aren't consenting to be objectified in music and in movies. Rape culture is very, very real in movies and in music. And I think that is just as much of an impact to the objectification of women. And for role models, I think, yeah, if we can't find it, I mean, we would hope that our first role models will be the ones in our home. And I think that takes fathers and grandfathers and uncles and cousins and brothers taking that mantle up and saying, hey, like, this is how you should treat, you know, your mother or your sister or just the women in your life and then the women outside of you. And I think even those conversations from my family, they don't happen. The men in my family don't really teach the younger generation. They don't discipline the males in my family is Asian by background. So we're very much an Asian family by culture, and in Asian culture, boys, they're not disciplined. They don't do wrong. And there's always a reason why a boy does something. And I think that also feeds into that. So I think maybe even within the home, can we have these conversations where boys and men are being held accountable by the people in their lives, both male and female.
Yeah, I want to add as well about going from the objectification of people and the media, music industry, film industry, and now even more so social media. So something that I've read about and this is something, you know, with before, I think was Snapchat, when Snapchat started bringing the celebrity stories or whatever it was, celebrity snaps. That's when I left Snapchat, because I used to use it sometimes. But when that came, all I would see was like Kim Kardashian and this and that. And when I think about my students, because I'm a teacher at a secondary school, and they all have Snapchat. That's like one of their main ways they communicate with each other. And from the age of 11 to 16, that I teach, and to think about all that they see through that social media. Now there's TikTok as well, where there's a whole lot of videos, and some of them are funny or whatever, some of them could be educational, but actually a lot of the films is about all the music and all the dances, and with that comes a lot of looking what other people are doing and absorbing it. And because you want to be as popular and as cool, you're going to imitate that, even if that's the objectification. Now, young people don't know what they're doing. They don't necessarily understand that they are continuing they don't have an understanding that they're continuing a culture of over sexualization. They're just a product of it, and they are perpetrating it more and more. So I think absolutely in homes, these conversations need to be had about the risks of social media and the negative effects of it. And, young people should not be having free access to social media in the way that they have. And, you can't go to a family and tell them you're not allowed to use phones, or children under the age of this are not allowed to use phones. It is very difficult to control society in that way, as a free Western society will have it. But unfortunately, a lot of these issues probably do start in this looking at role models that are in our screens more than in our homes.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you ladies a question then? Would you say that social media and the sexualization of women on social media is an entirely separate conversation to women's safety?
No. When my nieces got on Instagram, for a lesson, they wanted to be public. They wanted their Instagram public. So my cousin sat her down, my oldest niece, and said, "Look at this picture, the first and only picture you've posted on your Instagram. Now from this picture, I can see this. I can see your school bag. Here's your school name. I can see your street name right here. I can see that there's a car in this picture, and then now you've just posted a second picture. That same car is in this picture. So now I know you're associated with this school, this street, and this specific car where I can see the license plate number. I know that the time of day, it looks like mid-afternoon. So now I know, okay, you're coming home from school mid-afternoon. If I wanted to, if I was a predator, I could have taken these 2 photos of you being made public, 12-year-old daughter, and I could find you." And that has not, and my niece's picture was not at all inappropriate. It was a 12-year-old little girl having fun, just got her Instagram page. So I don't think maybe I'm answering a different question. I don't think that social media is the cause for the objectification of women, but I think because women, the objectification and hypersexualization of the female body exists and is so entrenched in every facet of society, it is exacerbated by social media. And because it's right there, and I think it's a hard bargain, because at the, like, I post, I wouldn't call them thirst traps, maybe other people will, but I think, as a woman, I should also be able to celebrate that I have a beautiful body, or that I have this really great outfit on, without the fear of people saying, "Oh, well, she must be easy." you know, she must not think much of herself because she's wearing that, this or that, and posting this or that. And I think that's the wrong question also to ask. It shouldn't be, should I cover myself or do this or that for your sake? I think the question needs to be, it's not social media, it's the people who are using social media, and why are you going onto my social media page and, you know, looking for certain things when you don't need to. There is an entire internet out there. There's lots of porn out there. There's lots of things out there if you really needed to visually see something that you could. So I think it's maybe less about the tool of social media and more the effect of everything else that social media then kind of just makes even more at the forefront.
I think it's important to say as well that social media and technology in general is increasingly becoming a tool of coercion and control of women, and digital coercion and digital control is very much, has been identified as a factor of within the broader realm of coercive control and abuse of women by partners.
I also think that in terms of not just social media, but, you know, everything we just discussed, the media, social media, porn, I do think that, yeah, it does objectify women. It might teach people to objectify women, and also it just turns sexuality into something that's like for the pleasure of others. And it makes it, I imagine, I mean, I'm glad I'm not 10 years younger than I am, but I imagine if you're just at an age where you're supposed to discover your sexuality through what you feel, but you keep being exposed to what it should look like for others and what others like and what others enjoy seeing you as. I don't know, I think it must create a lot of confusion and you know, you can see it in teenagers today. They don't look like we did back then. They look a lot more mature, but of course that's they look mature, but that does not mean that they are mature, and that does not mean that their relationships are necessarily more evolved than ours were then, but they understand very well what they should look like, and the makeup and the clothes and the photos and the relationships and yeah, and I imagine that could harm someone for the rest of their lives as well if they haven't really taken that time to explore at their own rhythm and pace what feels right to them. It's a very pedagogical thing. I'm not a teacher, but I think I'm agreeing with what Sonia said.
I agree, and actually, now that you've spoken about it, I do think that a lot of the modeling is about modeling relationships, and it's about modeling, you know, in your family, how do you treat your sisters and mothers, and how does a husband treat his wife, you know, in a heterosexual relationship, and you know, how do you treat the other people in your life? How do you show the younger generation how to treat one another, and what's acceptable and what's not, what's a boundary, and things like that? Because if those conversations and showing those things are not given within a home, the next place they will look at is their peers and probably social media, because most kids will have a phone now. So yeah, that's it. I think I wanted to say something else and I forgot.
I think one more, last thing to add about social media is people forget it's not real. None of that's real. My timeline's not real. We choose to post the best and the brightest moments. We don't post our real lives. And I think that would help. I'm not a parent and I'm not a teacher, so I'm not speaking from a place of knowledge, but I would imagine if young people could really grasp that idea. It took me a long time, it takes me consistently reminding myself, hey, those women that are on your newsfeed, that's not real. She you know, it's either, even if that's really her body and she's not had any, you know, medical altercations to her body, many influencers, that's all they do is work out, wear certain clothes, do their makeup, do the shopping, and that's kind of their job. And that's why they are on your news feed so much. And I think even as a fully grown adult, I have to remind myself, oh yeah, that's not the standard. You don't need to look like that, because it's really impossible to look like that if you're doing anything else other than just that thing. And I think maybe if we taught our kids that as well, like, hey, it's fun, but that's not what real life looks like. Real life looks like the messy kitchen that we're sitting in right now, and, you know, the bloody knees after football or whatever it might be. And I think maybe that could also go a long way, even to decreasing the objectification of the female body, is understanding what is real, what is reality, and what is fantasy. Yeah.
Thank you all for your thoughts. Unless people have any other points they want to make, I could start closing off with some, I guess I didn't take notes, but I'm just sort of mental notes of some of the summary points of today's conversation. Yeah, and if there's anything else I might have missed, someone else can help. So yeah, I found it quite interesting how we've started with women's safety and now we've ended with children and education. And I think we've gone through community, the role of community, the role of modeling, and the role of having the right relationships in order to have the right conversations. And I guess that goes from all the way from childhood, when someone's growing up, to adult conversations and how to actually still have an active voice, even if it's not with people that you are in your circles, like when you're a bystander and you're looking at an incident or situation. So I think is actually, if anything, I'll take away from this conversation today is how can we empower ourselves and empower the people to be open about this kind of issues, women's safety. I'm going to go now as far as saying men's safety, because they also have their own incidents that may happen in similar but different ways. Yeah, so how can we have the courage and ability to talk to others and maybe find ways that we can actually start empowering the communities around us and on modeling what good relationships look like and what good boundaries look like. And you know, then would be great if actions could be had to ensure that perpetrators of any kind of abuse would have their consequence that they should have. Because I guess a lot of the fear of not speaking up is about lack of consequence to the perpetrator. So I think that's my main takeaway points.
I think you summarized it perfectly, Sonia. I think that was really great. Thank you everyone so much for coming and for contributing. Does anyone else have any final thoughts or questions or things that they wanted to put forward?
Oh, sorry, go for it, Celeste. Please.
No, I was just going to say that I don't like patting men on shoulders for being decent human beings, but I do appreciate the presence of men here today, because I think it is a conversation that if I was a man, I would probably not want to have that all the time. But I do appreciate it. So thanks.
Thank you. So what I am going to take from this conversation, among other things, and this is coming from, again, from somebody that has a small platform, is bystander and community, tackling those 2 points, especially within the community echo chambers of being able to get inside of those, I guess, I call them eggheads, people that don't understand the common good, getting inside of those communities in order to have that discussion to some of these points. Reporting and how it's policed make women feel safe, and not only that, it then enforces the and consequence of actions. So that is, I guess, a wider, I don't know what that journey looks like of reporting on police. And so I guess we'd have to do some more research. And then how for young people to be safe and engaged on social media. And I see social media being very, very hazardous to the progress of where people see role models. But that's kind of from my perspective. But yeah, wonder if someone else on.
Right, great. Thank you all. I think we probably could close. It's been an hour and a half. And I think it's quite a good conversation for women to be able to speak out and men to speak out as well as listening. And I hope that you all have thoroughly been blessed and informed, and yeah. Thanks for everyone to having their space and holding that space for others as well to share. It has been great. You may go if you'd like to. Have a great evening. And yeah, thanks. Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Great to hear from you.